Welcome back, everyone. So let's start actually building our Monsters Rolodex project so that it looks much more similar to the application we're expecting it to be. To begin with, what I want you to think about with this app component that we have here, this class component. Let's get rid of everything inside except for the div. Right now, this app component is pretty much the only component in the entire application. And it means that it represents the entire application as well. What I want you to think about is that when you look inside of index.js, I want you to ignore everything except for this part right here, React.dom.render. What it's saying is that React, I want you to render whatever's given to you as the first argument at the point where you go onto the document and you find some element with root. I explained to you earlier that when you look inside of the index.html file that got generated for us, we had this div with the ID of root. And what React does is it says, okay, instead of this div, I want you to render the entire application. And the way it does that is it takes this argument, which is really just the app as far as we're concerned. This app is this component. Whatever this component renders is whatever React DOM is going to render in this place. So here, this component is actually going to contain our entire application. All of the HTML here that we're going to return is going to be all of the HTML of our application. And these are going to be broken up into smaller and smaller components. And we'll talk about how that's done. But what you need to understand really is that this app component represents the entire application. It's a pretty common best practice to do so, where you have one app component, and this app component is what you use to render as the entirety of your application. So now that we understand that the app is going to be the actual application, let's start actually building it out and understanding what it is that we're trying to do. So with Monsters Rolodex, it is a Rolodex, which is a tool that shows you a bunch of different user profiles. In our particular case, these users are monsters. Now let's say we wanted to show 3 monsters. How would we go about doing that, doing what we know? Well, to begin with, inside of state, maybe we have 3 different monsters. We have monster 1, which is going to be a monster with the name of Linda. We have monster 2, which is going to be a similar object with the name of Frank. And then we have monster 3, which has the name of Jackie. Here, inside of our div, we want to render these 3 monsters somehow. And for now, just to keep it simple, let's say we render these monsters' names as h1s. So what we can do is we can say h1, and then using curly braces, monster1.name. Or sorry, this.state.monster1.name. And then similarly, we would just copy this 3 times. And now we use monster 2 and monster 3. Now, if we save this and we go to our application, we see that we have it updated. Linda, Frank, and Jackie are showing. So our code is working. But let's go back to this code here. This is actually pretty repetitive. If we had 100 monsters or 1,000 monsters, if we imagine a really big Rolodex, then do we have to copy and paste this 1,000 times? That seems extremely inefficient, doesn't it? What if instead we know that all of these different things are going to be the same? All these different monsters are going to be displayed using just an h1. Can we instead just use this as a template, especially if every single one of these monsters is the same shape of data? The object is just an object that has a name of Jackie, or a name of Frank, or a name of Linda, or a name of whatever. We know that we can expect that this object is going to have a name property that's going to be a string. So we're just going to want to put that string inside of an h1. Can we just reuse the same HTML template? Well, actually we can. And this is what we're going to do to make this way easier for us. So what I'm going to do is that instead of each of these individual monsters having their own key on the state, I'm going to make a new key called monsters. And it's going to contain an array. Inside of this array is going to be my 3 monsters. So I'm just going to copy this over and get rid of the keys because it needs to actually look like an array. So now I have a monsters key with an array of our monsters as we had before. And now instead what I'm going to do is I just want to use this H1 template. But how do I access this array and convert it into those H1s? Well, here I'm going to use the array method map. So inside of our HTML, we're going to once again now call squiggly braces because I mentioned before that we want to access JavaScript. So I want to say this.state.monsters, which gives me the array. And I want to use the .map method. The .map method is a method that allows you to iterate over every single element from left to right inside of your array, and it gives you back a new array. But why is this useful? Because what we really want is an array of HTML elements with the shape that we expect the HTML to render. So in our particular case, we want to return a bunch of H1s where the text inside is the name of the monster. So right now I have an array of JSON objects. I don't have an array of the JSS HTML. So how do I do that? I use .map. .map, the way it works is you pass it a callback function. This callback function, the first argument that it gets is the actual element. So in this case, it's a monster. We know it's a monster. What React does, or rather what JavaScript does with .map, because map is a JavaScript method on arrays, is that it takes the callback function that you pass to it and it invokes it on every single element inside of the array, from top to bottom or left to right in this particular case. So we know that when we invoke this callback on this element, this one first element first inside of our array, this monster is going to be the element itself. It's going to give us that JSON object where the name is Linda. And here what we want to do is we want to return back the H1, as I mentioned, where I'm calling. So once again, we need the curly braces because we're inside of HTML. I want monster.name. Here, what's going to happen, as I mentioned, is that React is going to look at your code and say, oh, inside of here, there is some curly braces. You want to access this.state.monsters, which is an array, and you want to map over it. What you want to do in that map is you want to give me this callback function where I'm going to take the element that you're trying to iterate through, so each of these different monsters, and I'm going to give you access to it inside of the callback. And what we want to do is we want to say, okay, with that monster or with that element, I want you to return me in that place an H1 where the inside is using monster.name. So this particular monster, I'm going to put Linda in there, and then the next one, when it iterates on the second element, it's going to use Frank. And then in the third element, it's going to use Jackie. And here, when we look at our code, we see that it still works. In fact, to prove that it's still working, I'm just going to add a fourth one, and this monster is going to be Andre. If I save and I go, there it is. So easy now that inside of this array, all we need to do is just make sure that we have an array where every object has the same signature or the same shape. And now inside of our code, our .map function is always going to now just generate a new H1 every time a new monster is added inside, or it's at least going to do it for every single monster inside of our array. And this is extremely powerful because by doing this now, this one block of code right here now encapsulates the entire UI rendering of all of the different monsters that we want to show. And this is an extremely powerful thing about React. Now, if you're unfamiliar with .map, we're going to include a video in our appendix where Andre's going to go into more depth about map if you're uncomfortable with it. But if you are, and you already understand how map works, then let's move on to the next lesson. And the next lesson, we're going to talk about something that some of you might have seen if you have your developer console open. You'll see that there's this warning where each child in a list should have a key property. And we're going to go into exactly what that means in the next video. I'll see you there.